quest for international religious freedom has flown under the radar in Washington for many years, but appears to be heating up right now. Isaac Six is the Director of Advocacy for Open Doors USA and made that case in a recent piece published in the National Review. He joins us now with more. Isaac, great to have you on the show. You say the imprisonment of Pastor Andrew Brunson, the American pastor in Turkey, was a wake-up call for many Americans opening their eyes to religious persecution around the world. What was it about the case that caught the attention of so many people?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it was about this specific case, but I can tell you it definitely caught more attention than other cases I've worked on in the last decade. Pastor Brunson, I think it was relatable. He was an American. He was from North Carolina. And just over time, as the case grew in attention, people really started to pay close attention to it. And I had a lot of people I talked to who had never heard about these issues before, but had heard about Pastor Brunson and wanted to know what he was doing, how he was doing, and to get involved in helping him.
Yeah. What else is happening that is putting this issue of religious freedom before decision makers in our nation's capital right now?
I think a lot of things have happened. I think you had the ISIS genocide against Christians, Yazidis, and others in the Middle East going back a few years. And then this administration, President Trump and his administration, Vice President Pence, have really prioritized this issue. It's been around for quite some time now. They've really given a lot of backing to pushing this at the State Department and pushing this on Capitol Hill. And then there's just some fantastic members of Congress, both in the House and the Senate, who have really picked this up and are running with it while there's an opportunity to do so.
And when we look at those lawmakers from both sides of the political aisle, you in fact say that the issue of religious freedom is becoming more of a bipartisan issue. What are you seeing?
Yeah, that's right. There's a couple of bills that I mentioned in the article that I wrote, including one calling for the repeal of blasphemy laws globally. And that's led by Congressman Jamie Raskin, who's a Democrat from Maryland. But it has wide bipartisan support. And so I think there's agreement. Unfortunately, the discussion about religious freedom often turns to domestic issues. And when it comes to domestic talk of religious freedom, there's disagreement and it gets very partisan. But when we're talking about international religious freedom, you have to remember we're talking about people who are in prison for life, who are executed for their faith. We're talking about people of faith, people who are non-religious. And so it's incredibly severe compared to some of the things that we see domestically. So when we start to talk about those things, we actually find widespread agreement. No one on the left or the right thinks that someone should be beheaded because they decided to change their religion from one faith to another. So if we find that area of agreement and we can work together, I think there's really a huge opportunity to make this bipartisan.
So with this increased attention placed on the issue, what are you hoping for?
I'd really like to see the consistency of this issue. We don't want it to just sort of ebb and flow with political tides. This is a long-running issue. And while I'm excited to work on cases like Pastor Brunson's case and others where we see some results, over just a year or two, really what we want to see is tectonic shifts in the way that the world treats religious freedom. I quote in the article that 80% of the world's population lives in countries where there's high levels of hostility or restrictions to religion. And so we are so far from a world where religious freedom is sort of guaranteed for all. And I'd love to see that over the next decade, we see that this revolution that's starting of the last few years really continue and grow into something that causes change all over the globe.
Yeah, and you guys at Open Doors USA, you do a terrific job documenting, highlighting, chronicling the abuses against people of faith around the world. You look at it, Christianity obviously is under intense persecution, under intense pressure. So too are other faiths like Islam, and you look at what's happening to the Uyghurs in China, right? So this cuts across various religions, right?
It does. And, we do document very carefully what's happening with the Christian community around the world. We know that about 260 million Christians live in places where they're at risk of high levels of persecution. And we're very careful in tracking all of this and reporting on it. But we also know that this does impact a lot of other people in faith groups. And so that's why it's an issue that can be bipartisan. It can be supported across the political, ideological, and faith spectrum, because really everyone is impacted by this. Yeah. And there's so much work left to be done. And so I really hope that this leads to long-term work.
Absolutely. We'll have to leave it right there. Isaac, thank you so much for coming on the show.